She's not getting paid though, so you might not cover.
All right, I want to call the solid waste work group meeting to order. We'll give Ray a couple minutes, but he just came from Homeland Security detail, but.
Good you were charging your car.
The EV car was dead, so I got to wait, you know.
I didn't want to say that.
No more water for you.
You started it, yeah.
So yeah, I took the opportunity of just putting together a very quick agenda. My apologies for not getting this information as well as some of the data that's been collected out to everyone earlier.
We loved it.
Data, that is good.
Correction, Brenda loves data. And everybody's eyes glaze over.
Yeah, right. Lots of things to do on it.
Especially when I don't have to sort it.
Got it down right now.
Yeah.
Ray, did you add anything to that packet that's not from me?
Yes.
Oh, I'll take them then. Thank you.
Did I not make enough copies?
No, I just thought that I already had it, but you added other stuff. Okay.
I think the only thing I added was
That.
the roll-off information you provided, and then also the spreadsheet. So, as far as the agenda, I just kind of thought it was important for the group itself to try to create a bit of a mission, if you would. So again, I think part of this stems from the spatialization committee and recent discussions as far as, well, what's the role of the spatialization committee? So along those lines, I said, well, maybe it's important for us to do the same thing as far as this work. And then from there I know one of the discussions that took place during the Greenport transfer station site visit was the potential of providing a base level of service and whether that's the intent and what that might look like. So just getting folks input on that. A brief review of the site visit that we took at the Greenport transfer station, as well as the discussion with Casella that took place on site. I then think from a discussion standpoint that we should think about ways of increasing revenue and decreasing expenses, if there are any, and how that might look. I have a few ideas, but I'd like the work group to discuss that as well. And then consider what the long-term options are to consider. I know we sent the RFP out as far as those copies. Obviously, that's one of the long-term solutions, but at least I think it should be discussed as far as are there others. I think at this point, as far as the work group's concerned, I tend to think that we're still on a fact-finding, if you would, trying to weigh things out and take a look at information. So I've provided a lot of information, which we'll get into as far as an overall discussion that Wendy could compile, and Wendy did a great job compiling a lot of information as far as expenses, as far as employees, number of employees at the various facilities, what the tonnage were at each one of the facilities. And then Jim was kind enough to take that information and then provide it into, I believe, one spreadsheet that really provides a better broad overview as far as what the overall costs are to the county as a whole. So that's kind of the way I would like to approach this today, if at all possible.
Oh, very good. You're on a roll.
And so again, first and foremost, I do want to apologize that I didn't get this information out to everybody ahead. Honestly. I know.
It's not like you're not busy, right?
Yes.
Right. You know.
I had to change hats
Right.
3 times. So I guess with that being said, as long as nobody has any issues with that, then we can jump into the agenda. And I think one of the first things to consider would be, again, what is the work group feel the goal should be as far as the committee itself? I mean, what are we here to really investigate and consider?
And again, I think that you touched on it a little bit, but I think one of the things we have to keep focused on that's difficult is we've got to go down two paths. I think we need to look at, are there immediate things that we can do to either increase revenue or cut expenses to help things right now today? And at the same time, what is our long-term goal of it? I want to know too, from all of the supervisors, what the county's goals are on how do we handle solid waste in Columbia County? How much service do we want to provide? Those are some of the things that, again, a couple years ago, we talked about closing down some stations. Said, no, let's fix them. We invested some money into them, and then we got the bill for that. Everybody's shocked. So, I get it. But these are hard decisions we got to have. And I know that this year's budget's going to be more difficult yet. But so if we can do something immediately, to reduce some expenses, I think that's a good step in the right direction.
Yeah, I also think that if we're able to identify those, I think that it does nothing but benefit the county as it looks towards a long-term solution. I think if we're able to reduce expenses, increase revenue, increase tonnage, if that's possible as well.
Without increasing expenses.
Without increasing expenses, right. But if we're able to do that, then depending upon the direction the county goes in the future, and if one of those is a private-public partnership, I think it makes it more attractive to one of those potential vendors as well. So that's one of the reasons of really not just jumping into that long-term solution, but looking at some of the short-term, because I think it would benefit us as we're trying to entertain a potential of an RFP and a future negotiation.
Sure, I agree. I think both statements that you guys made is the way we got ahead. Short-term goals as far as financial, get it more in line with where it needs to be. Long-term goals will be affected by what we do short-term, because if we can turn this thing around a little bit, on the short-term, maybe that'll keep working along and be able to fix some of our long-term goals, or we'll know. My thing is I just don't know where even if we went ahead and we did a hybrid, we don't really know where we're going to be able to, our weaknesses are.
Right.
So when we go to say Casella, where we're going to, go out there, we got to be able to say, well, we know this is our weak area. This is where we're really losing. We've got to unload this area of it, or somebody else has got to take over. We don't really even know, I don't believe 100% where that area is. And I got to tell you, I would like to see if there's a way that we could run this where it would be, productive and we would be able to not be such a deficit the way we are. But if it works where we have to have that hybrid, I would also do that. But yes, I think to define our work group mission is exactly where I said it.
I also think, though, from the site visit, that listening to the Casella employees, as they weren't talking to us, but they were talking among themselves, that they identified two issues that I heard more than once. One was the insufficient volume, that we have such low volume that we're a less attractive option. And the other is that we had a very attractive and well-organized primary location, which might afford some opportunity for them in terms of the vertical integration of their business. But they felt that we had a lot of satellites that could be consolidated. And that was just listening to their comments.
They like
Almost all of them, they're talking about
Yeah, I
consulting.
mean, they were very interested in that Greenport site. There's no doubt. We walked close to two of the leaders there, and their eyes were wide open.
Well, a lot of room.
They couldn't believe the amount of space and what was going on there and what they could do. Potentially, that's where their heads were spinning, frankly.
Right.
It was what they know they can do with it versus what we do.
Right, but it was for the growth of their business.
Correct.
Not really to service our business, which is, they're not mutually exclusive, but I think they saw that the idea that they could put trucks there, that they could have a repair shop there, they could start, what did you say, they work on saving pennies on the dollar.
They could offload there.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that was it.
They could, instead of
Right.
just going to
They're
Griffin
looking-
Park, they could swing in the Hudson, dump their stuff, go back to Dutchess.
So that's where a hybrid system could come in. We could still bring them in, they could dump, they can do what they want to do and still be somewhat involved.
Right.
Yeah, they were looking at it as a hub, no
Yeah.
question. There's no question. And that's one of the reasons that they have, at least they identified the fact that they have not been competitive in the Columbia County market. And you don't see private pickups from them as far as mass areas, is because it's not conducive economically. So this would provide them that opportunity, and there's enough capacity available as far as the permit where that would allow them to do that. If again, that's.
But also to go back to Jimmy's point, I wondered if those elements would be as attractive to other vendors as they were to Casella.
Sure.
Agreed.
And again, when you read the RFP, that they, provided, I only got through one of them really well, but there's a lot in there that we would have to decide long before we even enter into that process, But what services do we want to try and, have somebody else run? And I think to Jimmy's point is identifying our weaknesses and strengths, hopefully through this process helps to develop some of that.
But you don't think we know our weaknesses? You don't think Wendy knows our weaknesses? I think we know. I just don't think we want to really talk about.
Have we put it in writing?
No. I
Right, yeah.
agree. I think it's an exercise we have to take. But
When
I'm
you
saying that-
put it in
I
writing.
think we know.
RFP.
Agreed, right, but I just
Yeah.
think we.
No, I
again,
agree. We have to do that
I-
exercise.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I think we know, but I don't know if we really.
Correct. That's
Yeah.
my point.
Right.
I mean, we all got a general idea. We talk about tonnage, we talk about health, employees, blah, 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 and how much tonnage per person, that's what they were talking about, how much tonnage they do, or how much manpower and all that, But I think we need to break that down to really have it in numbers where we can look at that. And
And that's what gives us start.
There, yeah, so that's what, part of what has been already compiled, but again, not to jump ahead, but to the point that you made, Brenda, I think some of those actions we could potentially deal with now, as far as short term, to try to bring in additional tonnage. And I do want to discuss a thought process that I have and discussed with Wendy a little bit with seeing if we could start looking at negotiating with other private haulers and maybe put together a tier scale based on the amount of volume that they may be able to bring to us. So that's one of the things I want to discuss as we get further in with the group as a whole, because I think there are opportunities there now.
Okay, so you asked the question, which was right in that meeting, and said, well, why didn't you mention anything to us earlier about utilizing it? They never came to.
Well, no, I mean, we're contracted with Casella, right? So they're not gonna come and bring garbage and pay garbage to drop it off here when it's like,
But if it logistically could work for them, I was wondering. why
right,
they
yeah, no, there was no interest.
never-
But as a, if a Casella, it doesn't mean it's Casella, is interested in taking it off from us, and there's no hybrid, and we own the property still, and it's off our hands, and we're not losing money, and they agree to provide the services that we want provided. Why do we want to stay in this business? That's my question. I don't understand
I don't know if we're saying that. I think.
When you
Yeah, I
say
don't
about a hybrid, what do you?
No, I'm just saying that that's a possibility.
No, I understand that. I'm just posing a question.
Have you
Like,
looked at the Otsego
I'm sorry?
RFP, the Otsego RFP?
I'll be honest with you, I did not.
Okay, so you need to look at that, specifically Otsego, because they are the most similar, if you will, to our county.
Population wise too.
Except that they have two transfer stations, one in the northern and one in the southern of their county. If you look at that RFP that they did years ago and where they are now, you will see that any of the substations that they had are no longer operated through Casella. Townships, I'm assuming, I'm speculating on this because I don't know, had to take them over. So they literally are only running the two stations. So they came in, did a 5-year plan or whatever it was, phased out of everything and just kept the two transfer stations. So and I understand that's your long-term goal, to get completely out of the solid waste department. Just to be clear though, when we go through these exercises, the long-term goal will be for them not to have any of these substations. So we're kicking the can down the road continuously.
Letting somebody else do it.
When, in 5 years' time, you're still going to be in the same situation where some supervisors will be wondering, geez, we're getting rid of this service for our residents. So although you don't want it to be a service to the residents, some of you do, some of you don't, the entire department right now is running like a service to the residents. So long-term goals and short-term goals, you have to constantly say, we're closing the stations. You have to remember that. It's a pipe dream to say that any of these stations are going to remain open after 5 years
I agree.
unless the townships pull them in.
I agree, and I think that's where the position, I mean, it was obvious that's their position. I mean, you know.
Understood, but that's the whole purposes of that,
No,
of creating,
I
having that
completely get that.
discussion and as a group and saying, okay, baseline.
Sure.
Is that understood? Is that acceptable? Or not?
And I'm not saying that those stations, we should close them all. I'm just saying that that's, if you were looking at this from
But
somebody
right,
coming
it needs to
in
be.
and just looking at this from
Right.
dollars and cents, that's the answer. Now, I'm not saying us as a county, we should do that, but we want to do that because we want to provide service and we want to do this. Is there a way to make them more efficient, or is that really just not even on the table? And I realize we'll do
But
this
do we
in the
lose
section.
tonnage by closing them? That's the other thing. And is that
Probably
offset?
not based on the numbers
But
that
I
we
think
were.
that's what we want to walk through this.
Right,
exercise.
yes.
Yeah.
And we did touch on the last meeting, we tried to share some information about the fact that the county has an obligation in the solid waste master plan to provide a service, and whether we provide it as a county or whether we hire somebody else to provide it, there's a cost to that, and it's going to continue to be there and it's going to continue to escalate in my mind.
Yeah, I again, one of the,
I don't think it's a magic bullet of finding a couple $1 million.
no, agree. Yeah, and I do believe that, and it is an issue and it's a struggle because as a work group, it's up to the work group initially to define what those bases of services are, because you're going to look at the basis of service versus the overall cost. So now it's up to the work group to identify what is the acceptable level of service, and or preferred, and what are the costs associated with that, and are those costs acceptable, or is it going to be the opinion of the work group to say, we want no cost, we want either revenue or no, or zero
What about
input or
consolidation?
subsidy.
I know that was a discussion of the stations.
Well, that's part of
Let's
it.
run through
Right.
these then. Right? Do you want to lead
And
that or do you
and I
want
only
to?
brought that up because in full transparency, right? We're doing this exercise and that's great. When we bring up the idea of closing stations, the conversation right now today is, oh no, we couldn't do that. And so I brought up the fact that in 5 years' time or whatever, if we were absorbed by someone else, those stations would be closed.
Right.
As to sit in your brain to think about, so that those that say, oh no, we couldn't ever close those stations, they're all going to be closed. So
Then it's pretty
either
clear
we're
that they
pulling the
would.
trigger
I agree
or someone else is
1000% with
pulling
you.
the trigger. So, that was the reason for that.
no, I
So
agree.
in Oswego, did they basically go to local pickup if they closed all the
No, the
stations?
substations are still, there's 5 or 6, I believe, still
Right.
open, but
The town stuck them over.
it seems to be that the towns have.
The way the
absorbed them.
RFP, yeah, the way of the RFP, although it wasn't 100% clear, I agree,
Exactly.
it wasn't 100% clear. It seemed to indicate that the towns took over the responsibility for at least manning the stations.
Yeah.
It's still unclear how material is getting from point A to point
It
B,
is.
which is fine because I can make, inquiry to Oswego and I can contact them there.
Can I ask a question? Because I think it's important. When you say the towns took the stations over, what is that? What does that look like?
Well,
Town of Chatham
you
takes
can't
over there.
speculate on how that's gonna look like.
Well, I'm
right?
just saying,
'Cause
who you say that they put the employees in there?
Well, the town of Chatham could decide that they want to run their transfer station. They will have to or their convenience station, my apologies. They'll have to set up how that's going to look for them. Are they gonna have permits for the town residents? Is it gonna be just for town residents? So it would really depend
But
on
they
the
could choose
township.
whatever they want to
You
do.
know, do they want to partner with Ghent or
County,
Canton
right?
or whatever
Guarantee
else?
about
So
that.
that's beyond our conversation.
But they would still work with the county because they'd be still using the county to get rid of the.
Right, I would say from a county standpoint, and again, this is just high level, from a county standpoint, if the town is taking over the
We're out.
facility, then the town is responsible for manning it. Now, we as the county, and again, Wendy, by all means, say you have a different opinion. I would anticipate that we would now be in the hauling business, okay? So we would be charging the
Yes.
township
Right.
by the ton
Right.
as well as for grabbing the, unit, bringing it back to our facility, dumping, and then having
I don't
someone
know
haul
what
it
town
off.
would want to take that on.
I don't disagree, but again, I think, I
There
think,
could be some, you know?
as Wendy points out, and it was discussed, the hardship is, and the reality is that thinking otherwise, if someone else comes in, whether it's Casella, whether it's another third party, yeah, I think we're sticking our head in the sand.
Well,
There needs to be full
you're 100%
transparency
true.
across the board.
Yeah, I think that's the part that
It may
Wendy,
be a slow death, but it's gonna
right,
happen.
and I think
So-
that's the point that Wendy, I believe Wendy's trying to make is we need to come in and actually be upfront with each other and front with, and the reality of
Where
the
are we really
situation.
going, right?
Right,
Particularly in view of the recent conversations about the upgrades and the decision to continue.
correct.
But I also think that it's counterintuitive to think that decentralizing is gonna cost less money overall. I mean, is that part of our equation that we think about what it costs across the county? If the towns were to take over and to do their part, what it would cost the towns and the county combined? I mean, isn't
Well, you have a
that-
smaller group of residents that are saying, we want to fund this. That would be what's happening, and I
Yeah.
don't know,
They
to
need to
Jimmy's
shuffle
point.
money around.
Right, so at least from
But
the.
I think it has to cost more if you're
It
decentralizing.
probably would,
I don't-
overall.
Oh, yeah, I don't disagree,
But
but
residents can get whatever they want if they ask for the government to do it.
correct, and I think that's when it falls back onto the township. So is that something that they really want? If somebody really wants something, then regardless of the cost, now again, that's not my opinion, but generally speaking, people are gonna be willing
And
to
as
pay
a
for it.
town supervisor who wears both a county and a town hat, I would be looking at an overall cost, not
Right.
a town by town cost.
And that's fine, right? But again, I believe that gets back into that base
Level of
service, right?
Okay.
So it boils down there, we really just need to,
Yeah,
we're going around in circles here. We just really need to say, what are we gonna do?
Right,
Do you want
right. So
something
what's the
stands
goal?
ahead?
Right, so
Gotta
what's
take
the
a
goal?
stand.
So,
Consolidate, or
right,
are
so
we gonna just say, now, we're not gonna do it?
I think the immediate thing to start in the right direction, I'm pretty sure Wendy has a great idea on this, and she just needs our support. Which ones we close?
Yeah, but how do you
It's not,
consolidate?
it's not if, it's which ones,
Right.
how many, is it half of them?
If I could come to the board with my dream list, right?
What would it be?
We would keep Chatham, Greenport, obviously, Kinderhook, Livingston, and Copay. Now, the reason why I'm choosing Livingston over Germantown, because if you look at my sheet, my numbers, Germantown looks better. They're open 2 full days versus 1.5 days. Livingston is on a landfill. And it's secure. Germantown is next to the Germantown Town Hall or Town Highway Department. And you have full access to that station 24/7. Even with gates, you can get in and around or whatever. So Livingston is a little more secure as far as people not getting away with dumping for free. And it's also on the landfill, which we have to monitor and deal with anyways. So that is why I chose.
That cuts out how
Livingston.
many-
Yeah, what does that save us?
So that
And I
cuts
think it
out
would move.
Hillsdale, Gallatin, Germantown, and I really need to discuss the New Lebanon recycling. Because we're only pulling in 30 ton roughly a year of recycling, and I don't have New Lebanon recycling on here.
It's an indulgence.
But it's an indulgence. I'm having a difficult time right now staffing it because I have a lot of part-timers out for numerous reasons, whether it's medical or vacation or whatever. So I'm having a really hard time finding someone to go up to New Lebanon for a half a day on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And then we have to go there every other week
To pick up.
to pick up a container that
It's
has,
not even filled.
like a ton in it or whatever.
That's what they were
So
talking about.
Right, so why are we
It's-
doing it?
we're doing it because it was,
It was always
I
done.
I believe looking through old paperwork, we started doing recycling in New Lebanon because when they were trying to site a station up there way, way, way long ago, and they couldn't come up with an agreement on where it was. It was, the supervisor at the time was, well, we're part of this county and we don't have any services. And so it was like, okay, well, will put a container in highway it used to be 2, for recycling. And so it kind of was like, we're not putting a station here because there was a lot of back and forth on where it wanted to be placed.
It's also a
So-
small site.
Well, it's in the highway department's parking lot, and so they're having a hard time with it there. The county highway is just, we used to have 2 containers. We just pulled one out this year.
So that should be part of this
It
discussion.
should be
Absolutely.
part of,
What-
it's
what
not
else?
on this list because it's just recycling.
Right, but still, what's the cost?
And it was an error on my.
What's the
part
savings
for
of cutting,
forgetting.
of closing all those ones you just mentioned? Hillsdale.
It's here somewhere.
Yeah, if I could, would you have to increase hours?
Well, so Livingston would be the only one that I would make, so because right now they're only open to half day on Tuesday and a full day on Saturday. Germantown's open a full day Wednesday, full day Saturday. So I would just make Livingston a full day Tuesday, full day Saturday.
So it's still over.
So
It's $100,000.
It's still it's still not negative.
Yeah.
So if
I
you,
know, but at least-
so if you look at the third page from the,
I gave it to the chairman.
Third page from the back.
yeah, it identifies each one of the stations, identifies the expenses, the tonnage of each one. This is the spreadsheet that Jim had compiled based on all of the data that Wendy had put together. So, it provides a good overview of what's taking place at each one of the stations.
Why does Copay lose so much money?
Well, so the funny thing about Copake is we've got 3 people working Copake right now,
You
which
need
is,
executive session to discuss employees.
I know, this is a
Okay.
whole nother, is this?
Recording.
It's a whole nother, debate, and
Okay.
talk about. So that's, but Copake is a 3 employee, where most of the others, Chatham is 3 as well, but most of the others are just 2. And then Gallatin, which is open on Saturdays, we've been, trying not to, but a lot of times we're running that on one, because the other person has been put out into other stations, just because.
If we shut the New Lebanon one down, where would people go up that way?
Chatham.
Chatham.
It's equidistant from Canaan to go to Chatham or New Lebanon.
Okay,
Same
so
number of
it's not-
miles, same number of minutes.
Yeah, it's still,
Just a little fuss about it, but I've already talked to her about that, but I didn't see, from my point of view, how that.
but you're still only looking at $100,000 savings here.
100,000 is 100,000.
Well.
Jim, do these numbers include debt service?
No, so it doesn't include all expenses.
I was just gonna ask that.
So this doesn't include like our insurance, debt, anything that's kind of umbrella for the whole thing. It just includes expenses directly attributed to
that station, so that we could identify.
and also doesn't include like the time, the driver's time going back and forth. We didn't include that. It's just the hours
So it
on the
is-
station. So there's a little, and then the profit loss is kind of, we don't know the revenue per station, so I took the revenue and divided it by the tonnage to kind of get, if they had that much tons, they're that share of the revenue sort of. So it's,
So what happens to those employees that are now going to those other stations that potentially we close? What happens? Are they gonna go do other things, or are they still part of the county's employees
What's
with their union?
So I don't know that
And
is
it's-
HR.
It's related to the unions.
Correct, that's what I said, the
There's
unions.
all sorts
Right.
of rights and bumping that happens.
Are they all part-time though?
These
It
are
would be,
part-timers.
they're part-timers.
Most of the part-timers are represented by the union.
Mhm.
And they're DPW employees, so
So Jim, just to put this in perspective, we're showing a loss of 370,000, but our loss in 24 total was how much about?
So
800?
well, we give them 9 something out of tax levy and then they lost another 200.
So
So
1.1.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You know.
I just want to put this in perspective.
It'd also be naive to think that by closing some of these stations, people aren't gonna hire part carriers. And we're gonna do some tonnage.
That's the reason, that's what I'm trying
Because
to
somebody
get
who's
at.
going
That's what
5 or
this
10 minutes,
time
no, it's not gonna drive 25 minutes, it's gonna hire on something. So. you're gonna-
Well, unless you can pick
A lot
up
of the
those
areas
carriers.
of the county back. Oh, I mean, my area's full of it because, I mean, we're close to Germantown, but I mean.
and what we need to do is to get those people to bring the tonnage to Greenport. That would be an advantage, you know, some of those little haulers.
So my apologies, but let's just, if we could jump back, okay? Because let's define the group itself. Okay, and then we can get in, I don't mind getting into the weeds and getting down deeper into the full discussion. But I think we need to define, to the best extent practical, the mission of this particular work group. Even if it's broad, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we all,
Well, I think it's what both of you guys were talking about, our group, you know, as far as short.
Two paths, basically,
Yeah,
you know.
Immediate action to save what we can and,
Right.
and continue on what's the long-term suggestion.
But I think we want to define, as part of both of those paths, we want to define what the basic level of service is. Both, I forgot the language you used, I think you said in terms of what we'd like, acceptable or preferred. I think those are two different things. very
absolutely,
different
yeah,
things.
that's the point.
And then, Ray, on this point where we're heading right now, are we looking at this as immediate savings to also then be more appealable to
Absolutely.
an outside?
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so it's the same.
It's a dual thing. right?
Yeah, because I
I
don't,
just want to make sure that that's also part of what we're thinking.
absolutely,
Okay.
yes, correct, yeah. Yeah, I think anything that we do in the short term should be
Sure, it makes
towards
it more
appealing.
to,
Okay. And I think when you.
But we have to capture some of that additional tonnage through there. That helps us, even if we were just staying in business as normal, when we go to redo a contract, you know, for getting rid of the garbage, we need tonnage in order to get that a price, you know, for that.
And that becomes a timing issue because we might want to think about having some of those contracts in place before we close some of those stations.
Agreed.
Yeah, but are we
Well-
really gonna lose that much tonnage? That's what I was.
Well-
I'm calculating.
But I'm saying we need to increase it from where we are today.
Yeah, no,
That
I know.
would be the advantage. And I think to Ray's point, you know, is there a lot of little, mom and pop operations that are picking up trash at the house that they should be coming to us? And that goes back to Ray's
But I
I
think,
think
original
the
comment.
The biggest way to increase tonnage would be through the Greenport transfer station.
right,
Right.
Not through these smaller
Right.
stations. And so I think to Ron's point is that he's stating that we need to entice people to utilize the Greenport transfer station. So we need to,
That being commercial haulers
Yeah.
as well, you know, not just,
we need to figure out how we can get, people into, you know, the station.
there's still a lot of these smaller haulers, let's talk about the smaller haulers first, you know, they have their own places they dump in, their own landfill, some of them.
No, so there's no landfill around here. You know, I guess Colony might be the closest, or you would have closed soon.
So
Um,
we could, if we can pull.
so they're
a
going
bunch
to
of
other
the smaller
transfer
ones in,
stations.
would that help?
Right.
and that's where Ray was going with the sliding scale of, you know, tonnage so that we can entice some of these small commercial.
What would we have to increase tonnage? I
I
don't know if
think-
you know, to make this a level of, let's say, consolidating some of these stations, you know, and then going at the convenience centers and then also bringing more tonnage in. Is there a magic number that we need to kind of hit to say?
A break even?
Yeah, you know, how much tonnage will we have to come in? And then we can kind of decide where our numbers would be, you know, like per ton to
We
charge.
could probably back into a number. Yeah.
Because as you start to bring more tonnage in, I'm sure expenses is gonna tweak a little bit with that, or really will
No, because it takes the same amount of time
to do it either
to
way.
do it either way,
Okay,
right?
all right,
So
so-
if we brought even in double the amount of MSW C&D that we're bringing in now, my guys in the yard would still be getting it done
Same amount.
in the same amount of
How
time.
much more would that bring us in?
We'd be paying less to get rid of it though, right?
Well,
Potentially.
Right.
potential, yeah, so moving forward contractually, you would be able to, with a higher tonnage, you would be able to negotiate your tip fee and your rates so that we could get a lower rate. Right now, we're paying quite a high rate. So the more tonnage that we get in, the better negotiating power we have on the other.
We're
ends.
also gonna have to sell it cheaper, so, you know, we're gonna have to charge less money, so we're gonna have to bring down, you know, that's gonna be an offset to our overall.
It would, right, but I mean,
Yeah.
again, economy
I-
of scale, if you bring in the volume,
Right,
then.
so we gotta
Correct.
figure out a calculation so we know what that number is.
Agreed.
You know,
Correct.
so that's something that we really should be doing, you know, to,
But if I understand you correctly, are we saying what is our maximum capacity given the infrastructure that we, and the resources that we currently have? What is the target? What are we aiming? What capacity are we aiming?
Well, the
for?
capacity of that
Our
site, from what I
current
understand,
40,000
has way more than what we're taking.
Well, again, we spent $1 million upgrading the Greenport transfer station with new top load buildings and, we can flow more tonnage through there now, much easier with the same.
How much more tonnage do we need to flow through there? And my thing is when we do flow more tonnage in, you're gonna be charging less
At
money.
some point-
Where is that offset?
Right, so we
yeah.
get, so again, we would have to go back and, but I guess the first thing would be, okay, is that
Are we
something,
willing to try?
or yeah, is that something that the
I
work
think
group
that
wants
should
us
be
to
something we
proceed?
should
Because
have on the
what
table.
I would like to do is if that's the case, I would like to really start looking at those numbers as far as a break-even point, but then also creating a tier system, which I can bring back to the work group and say, we would actively like to start reaching out to smaller private haulers with a sliding scale as far as what those fees would be and seeing if we're able to bring those haulers to deliver to Greenport. So the next question would be, from a legal standpoint, procurement standpoint, are there limitations on doing anything?
Potentially, but I mean, depends on. We'd have to dig into it a little bit, but I don't know what that.
Who would we be going against by doing that?
Well, we're not, I don't.
Not against, but you know what I'm saying? Who's our competition?
So competitively, you're looking at Green County across the river.
Mhm.
And they're always gonna have a lower tip fee. I can't imagine our tip fee would ever be as low as theirs. And then you've got, Barbado and B3, here in Columbia
Doesn't
County.
Barbado own his own place over there?
Yeah, he's got his own transfer station in Hillsdale.
He drives a lot.
Yes, he
His
does.
trucks are going through there every
And
day.
they occasionally come to us, but, they don't have the capacity to handle what they're, what they have. And their recycling goes across the.
What are
river.
their tip fees?
139, I believe, is B3, maybe.
So why wouldn't we target like a Barbado who's dumping a lot of stuff as opposed to trying to bust our chops on 17 other small guys? Why wouldn't we look at Barbado?
That's fine.
We can,
We can.
we just need
You
to.
need to-
I would not limit
I wouldn't
who we're
limit
gonna
it.
target. I would go to
That could be
every
potentially-
vendor that's out there and saying, we at Columbia County have capacity and we want your business. Are you interested in what will it take?
You're gonna get the other side dropping their prices and we'll be playing a competitive game if we're not careful. That's why with the smaller guys, you might be able to work that a little bit better.
Yeah, but is this really a pipe thing that we're gonna double it on?
Yes.
I mean, it really is far-fetched.
Well, again, no, the question, no, well,
You're
keep in
asking
mind-
us to you're asking us to give you ideas on how we can potentially
Improve
increase
No, I
revenue,
get that.
right?
Efficiency.
So
yeah.
as a business person sitting here outside of government, right? So if I was in private business, these are some things that I would do to increase revenue or at least try to bridge the gap between the two, right? So you've tasked us to come to you to ask for ways that we can do things. So these are options. These are examples of small things that we can do to help the overall issue that we're having. Is it going to be a cure-all? No, obviously it's not. There's no way I'm going to make up $1.2 million.
And
I
there's
mean,
no
like
single
that's,
solution. It's gonna
and
come from a number
it's going
of
to come
sources.
from bits and pieces from here, there, and everywhere, right? I understand we're not allowed to be competitive. We're not asking to be competitive, but we right now are so far off the mark that, I mean, we literally just said, please go somewhere else.
Why can't we be competitive? You just said we're not allowed. to be
We're told,
competitive.
we've been told countless times that we're not to be competitive.
As far as competing with private businesses.
But, maybe we've reached the point where in business, we're in business.
I don't disagree with you.
We talked in the fall, whenever it was, past the summer season, we talked about having like this fire sale for the summer.
Yes.
Whereby the tipping fees were gonna be reduced,
Mhm.
and just as an experiment to see how much extra tonnage we can get. Why can't we do that?
Well, that goes back to a question for Jim on how we structure that. And I think Ray's point, I think where we can deal with that now is to say that we have a tier system and we're going to say, if a vendor is bringing us X number of tonnage, then your price is X. But we're not lowering it for everybody, but you have to have a structure there in order to get to that point so that we satisfy our control over
But I think we
it.
also have to go back to Wendy's point of view. We have to look at it from the hauler's point of view. The landscape is changing for them too. Landfills are closing for them too. So they need to start looking at other
Correct.
opportunities.
Of course, the money
And so
will go
what
across
we
the
need to
river,
do, I
Yeah.
think what we need to do is be in a position to market ourselves effectively to those companies. And I don't see that as competition. I see that just marketing our services.
And that's fine. Again, I'm going on past practice, and I hate to use that term because now I start thinking about HR because HR is always telling me about past practices with the unions and things of that nature. But I would agree that that is the case, that we need to be looking and trying to make ourselves more competitive and promoting ourselves because we're not promoting ourselves. One of the other areas that I think we can bring in additional business is the roll-offs. And Wendy's identified that. So Wendy has identified it so well. And I believe that you had asked that question while we were taking our site visit out in Greenport.
There's a graveyard of dumpsters there.
And right now, I mean, there's information within the packet that was provided to you as far as the number of roll-offs that we're doing, okay? And what the tonnage is and the frequency. But we're not promoting that, okay? Other than having it on our website. And if you drive around even just the city of Hudson, you'll see 10 dumpsters and maybe one is Columbia County. And I just don't think that contractors know that this service is available.
Well, we know that it's available, but the
It's the
prices are so
price.
much more.
No, not for our roll-offs.
No, not for.
When-
Contractors are-
No, they're cheaper.
Yeah. Our
$300 for a dumpster? That's what we got charged.
A roll, a 10, so a 10-yard, 20-yard, 30-yard, 50-yard. You know, looking at other competitors in the region, we are,
What do you charge? Last I knew, a coworker of mine got
well, our
one.
10-yard is 400, and that includes the delivery, a week's worth, and a ton of garbage.
We paid $325.
So when you live in Springs,
325.
it's 300 for a yard for a week and.
Yeah.
And how much do
Yeah.
you charge after that per ton?
It's prorated at 150 a ton.
Okay,
But you
see, that's
can't-
the thing there, like when I rented it, it's cheaper. Because
'Cause they don't.
you get, yeah, I think it's.
They don't charge extra.
400 and you don't, you get some, I think it was, I forgot how many tons, but there was a certain amount of tons you got for free in that price. And then I think it was 140 a ton or something like that,
Right, on
So-
top of it, right. So there's a base amount for a
Yeah,
certain
but it was
tonnage.
cheaper than, we were more.
But because
can
we had
look
gotten
at
in some information from HRI, excuse me, and looking at some of their numbers, they've just recently come into the business and they're actually more expensive. So I,
Tour the trucks this morning.
You're
Number
seeing
one,
them
with
everywhere.
roll-offs on.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
in here.
They've been our best. They've been our best customer.
Who's that?
HRI.
They bring almost all of their.
Yeah.
We're back in the weeds again, but I think the group has to do exactly what you said, delineate what in fact we want to do. But ultimately, the county will lose money no matter what we do. There's no way we're gonna make up $1.2 million. We can mitigate that sum, and we have to say as a group, is that what we want to do? We're gonna shave 100, 300, 400. Still gonna lose $800,000, but we're gonna provide the
Yeah,
service.
but you gotta look at what's it gonna cost.
I understand, but I'm saying we have to look at that and say, is that ultimately what we want to do? Or is the goal of this committee to say, we don't want to lose any money?
That's exactly what I'm,
And that's what we
that's
have
the
to talk
guidance,
about.
right?
Those are the
Because
two
otherwise we can just continue to provide you information
Correct.
without getting anywhere.
But
We
how do
need
we
to know
know?
what your end game is and what the goal
But
is.
isn't the end game knowing what we can buy? If we put together a list of what things cost, we can then choose what we feel that we can, as a county, can afford.
Correct, yeah, but it's making that decision of what can be afforded and getting to that
Right.
point. Right, and that gets back to the
The
base.
menu, right?
Yeah,
getting
because
back
you
to
don't
the
know,
base.
privatizing, you don't know what that's gonna be a cost.
That's gonna have a cost too. That's
Yeah.
not, that's
So,
not
I
a
mean,
free.
That's
you
the
know.
other side of this, where that's the second. part
But
of it.
Casella did say that in all of those towns, unless I'm heard them wrong, that they did turn it around to where the counties were not losing money.
But I
That's what
would be
Casella-
very, yeah, they have, if you look at that, that's because they have the landfill, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I'm
So
just
they
saying
have that end
that was-
point, and
yeah.
that's a huge benefit.
And you're gonna shut the convenience.
And then they're bringing you-
Right, so I can tell you through other counties that I had previously contacted when first looking at this, okay? They each subsidize it in some manner, okay? Some are enterprise funds such as the county, the majority of them are not. enterprise funds and they're part of a county service, just like every other county service is. But when you looked at it, and I think it was Tompkins County was one of the big ones, where everybody was touting everything that Tompkins County was doing, because they were providing all kinds of services and availability for solid waste as far as the residents. And they actually were working with Casella, and Casella was running their operation at one of their transfer stations. That all being said, they were providing a fee. Again, it wasn't included into the annual property taxes, okay, as far as the subsidy. However, every parcel within that county was being charged a fee at the beginning of the year, which was a separate fee not associated with
So
taxes.
if you-
So again, no matter how you look at it,
But that could be a source of revenue for us if we chose it to be. We
true,
could
but it's
also
still,
choose-
no matter how
It's
you
still
look at it,
tax
it's still
dollars.
a
No,
subsidy.
and
It's
that-
still a
and that might-
subsidy.
And I'm not saying I would support that, because I think there'd be resistance. I know that 30 to 40% of people in our town, even though they have free cash to be free, still go to a carding system or private hauler because it suits them. It's convenience, right? But they still pay taxes for
Agreed.
the transfer station. So there's that
But my
kind of
point-
inequity.
Yeah, I mean, the point that I was really trying to make is 9 out of 10 of the locations and the counties that you're looking at, they're subsidizing it in some way.
But I think.
Sure, so maybe not
We're just
1.2.
I agree, right,
Maybe it's
and that gets
400
back
plus
into,
county
so
and 500.
what, so what's the accept, you know,
Well,
again,
wait a minute.
that whole discussion of what's acceptable.
You shut these convenience centers down, all of them. Are we talking $400,000? Is that a number I would use? What are we really talking?
Sure, every one of them?
We're talking about 100 for the.
Well, you
first
leave
floor.
Greenport. Right there.
Oh, you have other expenses that are in there. So
Yeah. I'm just, what I'm saying is that if you, it did go out privatized, these things wouldn't leave. These convenience centers probably.
That's, yeah, that, you know, that number includes the revenue. So if we assume that, you know, some of that revenue is going away and some of it's going to
That's what
stay
I'm
with
saying,
us,
yeah.
so we don't know what that is.
Yeah. So, is saying closing all these convenience centers even a good idea? Because we're losing revenue, so, you know, we maybe consolidate that, that's where I'm going, you know?
But if you look, I mean, I just did a quick back of the envelope. For MSWC and D, those 4 stations were 2 to 3% of the total volume. Recycling, they were 16%. Food scraps, they were 10%. So I think we have to look at the numbers, you know, in categories to answer questions, not just broadly, because there's some
Right.
real curves there, ups and downs. I mean, it seems strange to me that you'd be 2% of the MSW and you'd be 16% of the recycling.
I think it's just because the recycling overall is such a small number.
Well,
Because we're only
Germantown,
bringing in 1,800.
right, but Germantown has 133, almost 139.
Right, but
tons
when
of
you
that.
take 131 ton of recyclable, but you're putting it against a total for the year of
That's
1,800.
1,800, right, no, but
So it's gonna make that, it looks like a higher number.
It looks like a higher percentage. but-
well,
Because how much, what is the
And real enough, people
percentage,
go to living
the
stand.
difference, the percentage of like recycling from the garbage? You know, if it's,
well, we don't have that.
Yeah,
right,
right.
exactly, so it's,
Yes, we finally
Yeah,
We're
made
just
Over
looking at the
inflates
volumes.
recycling.
We're just
Yeah.
looking at the volumes.
I understand what you're
Total
saying,
volume,
it just
right.
kind of, the recycling always looks a little overrelated because the overall tonnage that we're bringing in is so minor.
So have you synthesized what we've been talking about? Do we have a set of goals here, or are we still struggling with the set of goals?
I'm still struggling with the set of goals. I'm hearing various goals.
You are, yeah.
And ideas of goals, right?
You know.
Well, you gotta weigh the pros and cons of
I mean,
keeping it, and you gotta weigh the
correct.
pros
To
and
me, it
cons
seems
of,
like the short term, we should decide which 2, 3, 4 stations we need to close as soon as possible. Move forward and go down the same route as trying to increase revenue, maybe try to pull another haulers. But we still have to, be, you know, looking at the seller, somebody to step in and help. us out.
I'm not.
It's all
yeah,
baby steps,
that's-
but eventually we're gonna end up with where we need help.
Right, that's
I mean,
fine.
that's,
Right.
but we
I-
have to keep moving. And I think the first step is which 3 do you want to get rid of? Which 4 do you want to get rid of?
But
I don't
Ray,
see any way around it.
Since we really don't know what Casella would offer us or wants to do in the county, it's hard for us to sort of have a sense of, I know we're going down 2 different paths, close this, do that. save a couple $100,000, save $100,000. But we don't know what the other number is. So it's very hard for us to
They
understand.
were clear to us. that-
We know that they're interested.
No, wait a minute. They were clear to us saying, what do you guys want?
Right, that's,
And-
and
and
therein
then-
lies the problem that I
So
have.
then why don't we just work on those goals of what we
We can
want?
add that to that.
That's part of the, that's part of the list,
Let's
because,
just look at
because
that.
I cannot create an RFP
Correct.
if I don't know what the group's goals are. That's what I'm trying, that's one of the issues that I'm trying to get to. I'm not saying it's an end game.
We want to provide service to everyone and we want to have no, we don't want to have any loss.
Right, there you go. That's the- right, and
Let
that's
me,
easy.
so let me,
Realistically.
right, so let me change that to say the realistic
Yeah,
base level of services.
right.
Right, so if that's the list, then let's just go through what it is that the county would love to see, a realistic set of goals that we'd like to see happen. And I think that it starts with, we'd like to lose less money.
Mhm.
You know, we'd like to provide service to the county. We're also,
Whoa,
What
as
kind
far
of
as,
service, though?
right, what kind of service?
I understand, I didn't finish my statement. You both jumped down my throat.
Well, we know that you like to go very quickly, so we didn't want to lose the track. We didn't want you to lose the thought process.
Doesn't slow you down.
Right.
Livingston, yeah.
First to go.
I would say.
It's all right.
instead
I'm
of-
getting beat up anyway. It don't matter.
In terms of a baseline, I think we want to provide access to services because we don't know if that access is going to be through us or through a hauler or let's say provide access to service.
But do we all agree that and I'm not saying it's, this is a timing issue, this is a discussion. We all agree that, as you said, when ultimately, maybe if another company came in, they would close them all, right? But I think we all agree here that maybe we should be looking at, as Ray says, maybe keeping just some open, right? That would be the first step, right, to the county, because I think the members of the community or the county
It's more.
are not gonna be
palatable.
happy, but it'd be more palatable to them to say, we're closing some of it, right? To try to continue giving services. That's one of the services, right? It's still costing the county money, county taxpayer money, but we've identified the fact that we just can't keep all these stations up, right? I mean, that's probably in the first discussion. What those stations are, I would say that Wendy would know best in that. That her list made sense to me because it's sort of geographically also makes
Right,
great
that's
sense.
one of the things you have to look
You
at.
got Kinderhook, you have,
The intent.
was it yours that they're keeping on? Livingston, Chatham, and,
What works for
right?
you and me, I mean,
I think Germantown better.
So if we say we're going to supply access to services at a reasonable cost, that would give us a stepping off point to evaluate the efficiency of those stations and identify these stations which should be closed, but at the same time provide regional access.
I would like to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss contractual and employment issues.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right. So based on what I've heard so far, I'll come up with a draft as far as a mission. Okay, as far as that goes. One of the things that you had mentioned, Brenda, that I just want to go back to because it's really big and it's really important, is one of the terms you use is providing a service at a reasonable cost. Now, therein lies an issue. What is, as far as the group is concerned, what is a reasonable cost? Because there's reasonable cost from a user fee standpoint,
Right.
but then there's
You gotta go by
also,
market rate.
but, oh, no, but not only that, but then there's the quote, reasonable cost as it pertains to the actual taxpayers themselves that may not be using this.
Well, when I was in business, it was always a balance of the two,
Right.
because you needed the first one in order to get the second one.
Understood. So I guess I'm trying to understand from the group, as you sit here, is the ultimate goal, even though it's not going to be achievable, basically to come in with no subsidy to solid waste?
I don't think that's
I
reasonable.
don't think that's a
I don't
reasonable
think
goal.
that's reasonable.
Okay.
And that's what I've
I
been
think
asking
it's to
for forever.
reduce the subsidy.
What? Is
I don't
that-
think there should be a subsidy. I think it should be more user-based fees. I mean, how many people out there, we had that, well, that the percentage was skewed, I guess, but 30-some% used the damn thumbs and
But that
solid
could be,
station.
but in
So
part,
maybe it's 40%. So 60% of the county pays private haulers and doesn't use the system, and they're all having to pay.
all right, I'm going to put a different hat on and say, and please don't take this the wrong way for anyone, but I'm a resident of Columbia County as well, okay? And I pay taxes that subsidize mental health. Department of Social Services.
Social services, mental health.
Cornell Cooperative,
Soil-
soil and water.
soil and water.
You know,
So what's the difference?
Those are
Because those-
services
because
that
those are
essential
services-
Services, not, no.
But you
Is soil and water an essential service? It's still,
Not to the tune of $1.2 million, it's not.
still to the tune of 400,000. So my point is, when you're looking at
Cornell
everything in,
qualified.
when you, yeah, when you look
You
at
know.
So I'm
Cornell,
going to answer your question. I'm going to say that if people, if we've provided this service to residents, they're going to feel that something is being taken away if we don't provide the service. So how would your residents feel about that?
I think my residents would like me to continue to figure out how we can achieve the goal of providing, even if it's partnership or subbing it out or getting out completely, having that service there with no additional expense to them. And that's what we have to accomplish somehow.
I mean,
And I don't know what that is. If you want to, I mean, I still say it's just like Pine Haven all over. We're just rolling the wheels, but eventually we're gonna end up with a point where we're not gonna be able to do this. It's gonna get worse and worse every year. It's getting worse every year. I don't see it getting anywhere where it can be achievable and make it work.
understood, right? So, and again, that's why we're here at the table, but it's understanding. So what is acceptable?
But again, back to your point, Brendan, when you said provide a service at a, what did you say?
Reasonable.
Reasonable cost.
Why? Why is that last worded then?
Because I think.
Why isn't it comparable to what I'm paying for a private one?
I'm not thinking about the consumer at this point. I'm thinking about the government. What is our fiduciary responsibility? What do we think?
We
that
provide
we-
public safety through the sheriff's
Right.
office at whatever cost it is. It
Right.
just, it is.
So I'm
It-
thinking
you
of
know.
an internal goal, not an external goal.
Then you look at it as a service, as you're saying. I hate to use this analogy, but it works. Golf courses, they have a restaurant that loses $800,000 a year, and it's a service. It's just part of what it is. That's kind of to your point.
Well, yeah, and the reason I bring that up is because the reason that this department, okay, gets flagged every year as far as the audits is because when it was established, even though it's never been run as a enterprise fund, thank you, as an enterprise fund, okay, it was always established as an enterprise fund, which means it's run basically, it should be run like a private business and should be showing profit. It has never run that way. It has never been run that way. It has always been run as a service. And that's the reason that I bring up all those other ones is that it's a pipe dream to think that you could run this as anything but a service. And to your point, Brenda, you identify, and I think we're sitting at the table here today and continue to use the term to provide a service at a reasonable cost.
Right.
Well, that reasonable cost still may be a
Maybe $1
deficit.
million a year,
And if
But
it's running at a deficit, then the reality is it's really not an enterprise fund.
But I also think that And I'm gonna sound like. Holly.
And I'm not saying, I'm not, so let me just finish my thought, my
Sorry,
apologies.
no, I thought.
Ray, I get what you're indicating and what you're saying, and I'm not saying that that's not going to be the ultimate end game of going to privatization or some sort of public-private partnership.
But the comparison to the departments that you talked about, I don't think is a fair. And it's a
Understood,
good point.
understood, but-
Garbage, you have other options. You can go, mental health.
I understand,
You
and
know,
you're absolutely
and
correct.
that's
That was
sort
a
of a
core, that was,
societal thing that we all agree that, we have to provide mental health, social services, keep,
but there are others. And again, I'm not, you mean to
Highway
pick on
department,
other departments, but,
You could.
soil and water is, how many people are utilizing soil and water?
well,
Is
the
that,
nursing home was a similar.
right, the farmers, they are. And I'm not saying, but again, you're looking at a smaller population compared to everyone. And I'm just using it as a comparable. You're absolutely right as far as those other services. You're right. I shouldn't have used those
No,
those others.
I
But
think
my
it's
point that I'm
always
trying,
gonna be an
but
issue.
the point that I'm trying to make is that it's never been run as a enterprise.
We are providing a service.
We are providing a service, and we just need to make sure, as we all agree, I believe, we need to cut the expenses and try to run it as efficiently as possible and still provide
We
for
should do that with every agency we have in the county.
a service, whatever that level of service.
And
Or
is.
access to service, one of the two.
I think the end goal, though, which is important on your little notepad over there, is that regardless of whether we're in this business, regardless of whether we close some transport stations or we end up getting out of this business to somebody else, we still want to provide service. And that could be part of what the RFP is,
Right, or access to service.
Or access.
I think that would be.
I think
that's
when I say
dramatic.
we, when I say we, I mean that we want to make sure that there's access to service from whoever, if. we
Or you're
decide
gonna have
to.
stuff all over the road. Correct. That's the other
Well,
thing, if you don't, people be dumping this stuff,
Well, I go back, and some of you remember when we had actually sheriff's deputies whose only responsibility was policing garbage.
Oh, God, that's true. So I just want to go back to what you said and say, to take it one step further. What brings us here is the challenge of reducing this red ink. But I think what we're not focusing enough on is the opportunity here. Because I think the landscape is changing. And if we do this kind of analysis and we go to the market and look at these other partnerships, we may find an opportunity here to make a bigger dent than what appears to be insurmountable at this point. I think with every challenge, there's always opportunity. But in this particular discipline or scope of work, I think there's more opportunity than we know. And that is the work I'd like to have in front of us, to identify those opportunities.
And I have to agree with that and also agree with Rob. I think it's extremely hard for us to sit here and make any kind of decision whatsoever, not knowing what's out there and what the offer is going to be.
Right.
Why can't we go back to Casella and say, look, give us an offer for everything that you see right here, all the substations included. And give us some A, and B, give us an offer for the Greenport station, whether it's a public-private partnership, whatever, okay, without the substations.
Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that they're going to manage? Does that mean they're going to manage our employees?
No, but what that also, it gives us a decision-making process to say, okay, here's what we have over here. We have something tangible to look at. The other thing that's possible is if I went to Supervisor Guzzi here and said, okay, Casella's really interested in the Greenport station because that works for them, this and that and everything else. But you decide you'd like to keep your transfer station open. It's $20-some thousand we could charge them back to keep that open. That's an option that the town would have.
PJ,
Right?
Neal-
All those substations we can keep open somehow, some way. But we can't decide any of this if we don't know what other offers are out there. And I think you and Rob are saying the same thing.
But I think where I would differ with what I think I'm hearing is that you're basing that on the current operating model. I want to see what other operating models.
Well,
That's fine.
they may
Yeah.
present that.
But
Yeah.
we have, in order to ask, we have to ask the same set of questions to all the providers. Otherwise, we're not going to get
we're gonna do
a list of what's out there.
Sure.
Right, but
Just started to sell.
Right.
I just picked on them.
But, and that was the question I asked earlier, is our attractiveness or the attraction of the Greenport Center that Casella has, would that same interest be with the other haulers? We don't know. The way their business is currently, the gaps in their business model, right now, Greenport's a good fit for that.
Mhm.
But it might not be a good fit for another
Well,
hauler.
they put the RFP out, they may not even respond to it. It may
Right.
not be something they're interested
But there might be something else they're interested in. I mean, I mean, you've all been deep in this for years. I'm new to this, so I'm seeing this with a fresh set of eyes. I just would like to know.
I just think that back to the nursing home situation, I remember this as clear as day, remember talking about it, and I was one who pushed it. And I was told, oh, well, it's not worth anything. And, you know, no one will be interested, it's not worth much, and we were in the process of spending $1 gazillion on more engineering studies and stuff. And we ended up getting $6.2 or $4 million for it. We were shocked, right? And, but it had value to somebody. What's that?
We always work something.
No, it was always told that it wasn't worth nowhere near that, Ron. Never was that.
We thought it was worth between 1 and 2.
Yes, it was never told it was that worth.
But it wasn't worth nothing.
No, what I'm saying 1 or 2 versus 6 we got. 1 or 2, we might not have sold it, but 6.4 or 2, whatever we sold it for, it was like, wow, it's got some serious value. I remember
Well, I
exactly
think
those
they
numbers.
do want, I think they do like the Greenport station. There's no
Sure.
question about
So give them those options and let's get back to some tangible things that we can work with. That's all I'm saying.
Could we do 2 things if you were able to summarize what some of this or all of this? Could we look at?
Some of,
I still think we're a long ways off from an RFP.
I do too.
I read through those RFPs and.
But sometimes it's easier for people to blue line something than it is
sure.
to
Oh,
brainstorm.
understand.
you know?
No, I appreciate them being there for that purpose, but I'm just saying, when I read them, it brings up a lot of questions. Is that what we want to put in there? What do we want to do?
Well, because I always go in the opposite direction of everybody else. I didn't read Oswego. I read the Albany one. So now I will go back and read the Oswego one first. But I also would like a chance to absorb the data that you provided today and then maybe send you some additional questions. Because I think we're at a good starting point, but there's a lot in the air, a lot of noise.
So in the interim, talking about expenses and revenues, is it okay with the group for us, Wendy, myself, and getting together with Jim to look at some of these revenue items, such as being able to create some sort of a sliding scale for trying to then approach some haulers about bringing tonnage into the facility? We're not going to act on it. We're not going to reach out to them, but we're at least going to create that scale and at least see if we can create a list of the potential haulers that are currently active within the area. Okay. And then we can meet again and have the committee look at that information.
And when do you feel that's a good road to go down?
Yeah, I mean, it is short term. It's, you know, I would like to know if we have that option, if it would work, right? I mean, ideally, bringing in more tonnage would make us look better regardless of what we're doing. I honestly have a hard time with the lack of direction as far as short-term versus long-term goals, because our short-term goals are supposed to be short-term. We're supposed to be able to turn these things around and actually act on them. And it's 2, 3, 4, 5 months when an idea comes to the table before we can actually get permissions to do anything. So when I hear short-term goals for me, like a list of haulers or do a sliding scale, or how can I increase revenue, I'm basically, our hands are tied because it will be 4 months or 5 months before we can actually even implement that. And we don't have a mission. There's not a mission. There's, you know, there's talk about RFP, but yet we still can't sit down as a group and say, these are the things we absolutely want to put into that RFP as option A. And then option B is, you know, like an all or nothing or something, right? So that we have, but sitting here and having all of this data thrown at us and then asking, is that a viable thing? Yeah, I mean, I would have loved to have done the fire sale last year. I mean, I was like, great idea, let's do that. And
Why
then it
can't we
was
do
like,
that for all haulers rather than a
went.
sliding
So
scale? We just
my
make sure
short
you're
term, for me, short term is more like your long term, right? So I would love to be able to start increasing revenue and showing you that, yeah, our department can make up some of this while you're still trying to do your long.
That was my
term.
goal, to try and gather something
But I
this year. If it was
can't-
100 grand, it's
That's what
100
we
grand,
said right
you
at the
know.
beginning, like the 3 of us.
You know, it's
But again,
just-
but it does take time to Wendy's point.
It takes so much time.
Yeah,
and
but
there's
not, no
direction.
disrespect, Wendy, but from anybody, but we don't have a proposal that says, I'd like to do these 6 things and I think I could bring in this much revenue. And that I haven't heard from anybody. These are discussion points, right? And I'm open to that if there's a viable plan that says, if we do this is to short term, I guess.
Right, but
we'll
well,
call
I
it.
guess part of the issue is that we need to find collectively for Wendy and I, and again, that's the reason for maybe getting together with Jim a little bit with some of the sliding scale procurement wise, if you would. Can we do that as a county? Can we negotiate?
So we don't
I get
know that.
Yeah, I have to know that. I
Right.
need to know that I can provide for that sliding scale. I'm assuming we could because it'd be very similar to a water district or a sewer district that has a sliding scale on their fee structure for user rates. I'm assuming, but I'm not 100% sure. That's why I just want to know before I dip my toe into it that's allowable.
What's your opinion on this whole thing?
Right?
Yeah, I'm serious. You're working the numbers.
Save money.
I mean, I think we've been dancing around the fact that we need a decision on where we're going. If we do an RFP, what are we putting in that RFP? And we're spinning our wheels on everything else until then. So
I agree.
we need a decision.
But I think
And
if we
that's-
focus just on that RFP, I think we could come up with bullet points.
And we can make ourselves more attractive with these other things for the potential buyer. But until until they have a direction on where they're going, and we've been in a couple meetings now, we still don't know, are we trying to get rid of everything? Are we trying to get rid of just part of it? Are the employees gonna be our employees or their employees?
Right.
We need a decision on that.
And it's hard to make that decision because you all
Yeah,
have different
basically,
ideas
Right.
and opinions.
Right.
So, how do you get it
Well,
all
without
together?
input from Casella saying this is what you would save if we do it with all our employees, and this is what you'd save if we use your employees, and this is what you'd save if you close all the substations. I mean, I thought we were gonna try and get information from them to help us make that decision.
But that's not how it works.
We asked them to come in and say, how would you run this
But
business?
that's not how it works.
Well, we asked, we
They're not gonna,
we
they're not
asked,
gonna tip, they're not gonna give you.
Plus, we can't, if we're gonna do an RFP, we really
We
can't
have
do
to-
that.
Yeah, they just can't do that.
because they're not
I
gonna
mean,
tell
We
you.
don't want them to do it, because then they can't bid on it, you know,
It's
so.
just-
So can I ask a question on an RFP? Just a broad question. Can you put out an RFP that says, we would like you to take over our organization
What is that? But
and give us a proposal?
what does that mean, take over?
What we presently have as what
You
he
mean
just said.
operate?
Yeah, operate it. We still own the property, but they come in and operate the whole thing. And they present a proposal.
Are we owning the equipment? Do they own the equipment?
Well, we can fine tune those things.
Well, no, that's a big thing to put in the RFP. I mean, that's a jumping
No,
off.
I'm saying that, well, they said you could go 2 options.
Right, correct.
They said that we could own it and fix it, or they can own it and fix it.
They're right. They'll enter into an agreement either way, but we have to define that as ourselves first, you know, in order to do an RFP, I would think. I mean,
Yeah, I think,
these are things you got to identify to say,
I think
our
before I,
employees, their
right,
employees,
so
our equipment.
before I can put an RFP together, if that's the direction that the group wants us to go in, I have to have a very long discussion with HR and the union attorney.
Yeah, we're not even close to that.
Yeah, agreed, because there's so many potential ramifications of how that would need to be dealt with. And if we put an RFP out onto the street now, even if we don't act on it, but if we just put it out there, what is that going to do to the morale
That's gonna be a nightmare.
Well, you could just watch this
Okay.
meeting.
of the entire department?
You
That's
just,
why
we
there
just,
should have been an executive session.
right. You just open it up to the public if we,
We're
So,
just trying to get information.
Yeah.
To
All right.
make an
We have made
educated
no
decision.
direction, as you can tell.
Yeah, we don't have.
We've been going around.
well, I think we do have a bit of a direction. I think the way we first started, which was, we
too fast.
3 of us,
Mhm.
Ron and both of you guys, kind of come up with different points. I think that's definitely where we define where we're heading right now as a start.
Mhm.
And also then cost cutting into that would be some of the things that Wendy's talking about. You're talking about slide scale. PJ's got a good point too. Just shoot it out there for everybody, whatever. Those are things that could be discussed and brought back, say, for the next meeting. I think we need to get some of that stuff to see, these test the waters. I mean, we wasted this much time with this thing, and why don't we just test the waters and see if we could make a change And it does affect some of the numbers, the way we're doing it, by making these changes.
With our own steps.
With our own steps. And then at that point, you're gonna need to be able to say to people the reason why we're unloading all this stuff, why are we doing this?
Oh, yeah.
why are we doing that. You know, I think without doing due diligence first, it may not be as good. That's my opinion. I think you need to try to see if we can't make a change in it. And if we can at that point, then we'll also know our weaknesses. You know,
So I,
that we could,
So do we speak to the municipality? Do we talk to the municipalities that have these transfer stations that we're thinking about, rearranging? And do we just bring that to committee? Do you want?
I think you gotta
continue to
talk about, now
it?
you gotta go to HR.
Well, no, because we would just be absorbing employees at that point, I
I'm
think.
gonna take it to a different level.
Go ahead.
I think what we wanna do is provide continuous operations. We wanna.
Yeah.
And then, but I also think that we wanna look at.
I think a lot of our county does too, but
And I think we want to, the short-term goal is to provide, and I hate, this is a phrase I hate, operating efficiencies and cost reductions.
Right.
Because that's incumbent upon us to do that. And then I think the RFP is for the longer goal. What do we do? So what are the short-term operating efficiencies and then we look at the long-term goal what is our plan for the future?
And I think this committee needs to give Wendy and Ray permission to move forward here. Summer's fast approaching. and
Well,
it's a heavy season.
that's kind of where I'm trying
Are
to
you
go
gonna
with
do,
it.
are you gonna do the fire sale or the sliding scale?
We've brought a couple ideas before it.
Let's get it
You know,
done.
Those are
Get
two
it
whatever.
done.
very different things. too.
Right, Wendy? I mean, summer's your busy season, right?
So it's apparent we can't be doing two things at once. We've tried this around the table for an hour.
I thought we could, but.
We
But
can.
I'm saying.
But the committee doesn't seem to want to, so that's my point. If we don't want to try and make any immediate changes to save any money.
Well, I'm saying
Let's
that's
just say
an
that.
okay option. Or
Okay,
the other option, I guess.
so do we bring that to Public Works Committee next month and vote on it?
This month.
This month, we can do.
April.
I can-
Next week.
So what are we voting on? If we
I
want to
still have
stay
By
on
noon
the,
tomorrow.
if we want to stay on the cost saving topic, what are we voting on? What are we doing?
So we're closing.
How can you have that
No, you
conversation?
can't.
It's not right.
That's
Not that quick.
No, I think that.
I'm just saying, how do we get there? If,
Right,
you know,
but I think that if I could go to my home committee and say, is there a way to grant our department approval to
Solicit more business.
solicit more business, be more operationally efficient?
Right.
Without having to get approval for every single step I do, like a general broad, as long as it.
Like what, sending out letters,
It
and
could be,
soliciting
yeah.
business
like
that
a
way.
Broad spectrum type
Like an
of
initiative
thing.
to go with.
I'll work with Jim, we'll figure out that it's legally allowed and
promoting
just
yourself, in other words. you know.
have the committee give a broad approval. Yes, please make yourself try and do more operational efficiency without having to go to them every single time we come up with a new idea to get.
So what,
That's-
since this group is specifically working on
Yeah, it
this,
is.
right? Where it's not just the home committee that's working on
Right.
a lot of things. At least how I feel, what Wendy said is fine, but I think it should come to us first, is what I'm thinking, whatever this plan is, before it goes to the home committee.
Okay,
So that we can vet it through and say, yeah, this all sounds good. Then when you go to the home committee, you can say it's gone through the subcommittee of the solid waste.
That's where she's
committee.
getting
So
into
I
the
have
point
a
where
home
it takes,
Committee on Wednesday.
right, takes 2 to 3 months to
Right,
get things
okay,
through.
so I have a home committee on Wednesday. I would like to go to them and say, would you please grant me permissions to be able to market our department?
I can't see why, and it's not obvious to me why that is a provision that needs to be granted to market your services.
Because they're talking about marketing at a reduced rate.
Well, she hasn't said that. She said marketing your services.
Well, that's,
Well, I think that's
different.
Marketing and-
Well, marketing in general,
But the
because
promotions means.
Because the point's always been that we're not supposed to compete with businesses. That's what
But
she's
you're gonna
asking.
clarify that,
Yeah, I
right?
think
But
that's-
we're marketing, if we've not ever operated
try and
as
increase
a
tonnage.
business. I'm having trouble with this conflict. I can't see the conflict of competing with businesses.
I don't disagree with you.
I don't disagree either. It is
So who put it
literally what I've been told.
So why are we
Within working in my department that I am
What's the
not allowed to
conflict?
go
I'm sorry.
But who's told
Competing
you
with
that?
local-
Like,
So I
the-
don't know who says that, because
Competing with local-
we
Right.
are in business. I mean,
Competing with local business.
If
But it's-
anecdote, I mean, if it's anecdote, why don't we put it to bed?
Well, that's the reason for going to the
Right.
committee and saying, we,
let's try and get it on the record.
getting it onto the record that It's not just our decision and then supervisors coming down on us saying, who told you that you could go do that?
It's not
Because
really,
it's never been allowed or it's never been
Right.
done in the county.
it's
That's
not
what I'm
really
saying.
soliciting. It's sending a letter saying, hey,
No, it's
we're open for
promoting.
business.
You're announcing
It's
your
promoted.
services.
Right.
Correct, it's promoted.
Right. It's a simple letter.
But
Like,
you will have to do a reduction in pricing.
Well, do we or don't we? I mean, that I
Right.
would understand.
Well,
where we're
there's no
from.
question, if
that's
it
bad.
comes to a point of, creating that sliding scale, that reduction issue,
That
okay,
would be fine.
absolutely, that should come to a committee. And we do it with water, we do it with sewer as examples.
Right.
So obviously that, but if
But
we
the
are,
expedite-
but if we are promoting ourselves saying, we want to go ahead and send out notifications out to contractors and to, people that may be interested in roll-offs, okay? We want to be able to take action on that very quickly, all right?
But we gotta be
If we-
competitive.
Maybe that's what we learn from this, that we
Right.
are or aren't. competitive.
Correct.
Because-
As
because
a
it's
contractor,
counter-
you call up for the price.
But
So
it's
how does that work?
counterintuitive to me to reduce prices in the busy season of the year. To me, if you're gonna reduce prices, you're gonna do it in the slow time of the year, not the busy time of the year. So I don't know why I understand the fire sale piece here.
Well, our fire
Either.
sale actually was gonna be towards the end of the year.
Well, they're
That makes
looking to
sense.
increase
That's what it
We
was.
just-
It was
we want
like we were
increased
at the
volume.
end of the year.
Right.
But-
And so you have,
Sliding
and so
scale.
for the fire sale, we still have time
To
to
do
come
that.
up with a cost
Okay.
and then put it
Yeah.
between.
I'm not asking, I'm just asking that when we go to committee, that I can say, hey, these are things that we want to try and do to be more efficient. Do we have the leeway to do that without having to come here for permissions every time?
But why
And
not
have
bring
a
that all
list
to
of-
here, is what I'm saying, and then present it,
Because we
to
don't
the
meet on
committee.
a monthly basis.
when you don't meet, when, who
No,
does?
no, this here.
Well, we could.
I think we should.
If that's the case, then we need to fit it into our schedules as far as. Exactly.
Right, that's what I'm saying, is why not present what your ideas are to this committee, we look through it, say yes, and then at least when it goes to the home
Even if
committee,
you did a Zoom.
they can say,
That's
Well, I
fine.
didn't put together tonnages and dollars and all
Yeah.
that.
Right.
You
one
can't.
person.
You
So
can
I
resolve, no,
don't, there
this
is not enough
this
time in the world.
not if
for
you're
me to
voting
do
on
that,
anything, it has to be
so-
in person.
But
It would have to be in
it's,
person.
But we could
Yeah.
decide.
But actually, does the committee, so as a subcommittee, do we vote or is it?
We make a
recommended- or is it
You make a
recommended?
recommendation with a
But that was-
motion in this second.
But that would
Okay.
still have to be
Right.
in person. Okay.
I mean, again, when Wendy's point is it just takes so long because you're meeting monthly. You know, now you're 3 months into it already. She's asking for a general, it's,
I think if we're gonna make changes, short-term changes in terms of evaluating, the continuation of certain stations, we're gonna wanna do that prior to the 2026 budget prep. So I think that has to be a separate path. But in terms of this marketing our services for the station or for the roll-offs, I don't see why that needs additional approval. Or I think, couldn't we just say today in this group that that's
well, if that's the
within-
only,
falls
that is
within-
my point.
Right.
It seems to me that there was like a basket of things that we were talking about bringing.
I think
to
it's
the
right.
committee.
You're
but if
asking
we
to
could,
start,
and
right?
I think
Right.
that,
Just to say that we're
Ray
promoting,
and I are
we just want to
just-
be able to promote
Yeah.
ourselves as far as the services that we provide to private businesses.
while we're doing everything else,
Right.
let's promote.
To try
and
to get
see
your
if-
Well, if
revenue.
that's the only
And that's-
question, then I would think that this committee would say, sure, I'm fine
I would
with
be
that,
fine with that.
if that's all we're talking about.
Because we're not talking about rate changes. We're just
No.
talking about
Correct.
going. after
which you
the-
currently have.
Don't you think that rate changes needs to be part of it?
But that's a conversation for another time, because I know that's gonna have to be.
That'll have to come here, and then it'll have to
go-
And
That's
that's all of that.
So that's
I'm
sliding-
not asking for major things, I'm just asking for
The market.
permissions to be able to solicit.
Because, again, back to
For-
that point of, we don't want to compete with local businesses, where I don't know where that ever came from, but I'm sure it came from somewhere. The only question I have with roll-offs is I know that tons of them had holes in them and problems. Are they all ready to roll? I mean, you have enough that you could roll out, or?
We have plenty that are still usable,
Okay.
and we are waiting, for some to be welded, but we do have,
They're enough to
Enough.
get
We
out.
have volume. Right now, we have the volume.
So so if you do a flyer or a letter or whatever, I can send it to the supervisors and they can post it in their towns, and we can also send it out on our town newsletters so that people know.
Almost like, are you aware?
Yeah.
These are the services we
exactly.
offer.
Right.
Please
It's a
call us
reminder. It's
for a
reminder
price,
of
right.
The amount of roll-offs you're doing right now, you have the staff to get them where they need to go and get picked up and all of
And
that.
there's a great background story on this. This is helping us keep costs low. This is helping the
Right.
taxpayers because we're keeping our cost, we're lowering our costs.
We're trying to stay in the solid waste business so that we can continue to offer a service to the county, you know.
What were the other revenue streams? You talked about two. You talked about increasing volume and you talked about
Well,
loss.
Yeah, we talked about, roll-offs as far as advertising. We talked about the sliding scale as far as trying to get together with
That's what you didn't
haulers.
understand, right?
Now, we will need approval for that as far as that.
Raise-
I understand.
Ray, that had a question on that.
Oh,
sliding
I was
scale.
just curious on the sliding scale. How are you gonna market a sliding scale? So say you bring us 100 ton, we'll give you a price between such and such.
Right.
What if they come in 20 ton and you don't get the 100 ton? So how do
It's
you-
gonna be at a higher price. So
each time
basically,
they pay, they're gonna get the discounted pay? Or are you gonna?
no, we would basically enter into an agreement with them that they're going to be providing us X number of tons annually.
You know, if they don't hit that, then they pay the higher price.
Well, they'd be paying a premium is what they'd end up.
But they wouldn't,
They end up being.
they wouldn't during the whole year. How would that work? Let's
We'd have
just say you have
we'll
a
have to-
contract. that-
Again, we'll have to work,
Right,
we'll
yeah.
have to work through how that all would be done. There's no
Right.
question.
You don't think it's just easier to just put a low ball, put a lower price on it? Just,
That's definitely easier.
and that would be better because the idea is to build tonnage,
Mhm.
like what PJ's saying. So if, even if you bring 2 tons in, it's 2 tons more than what we had, you know? So you bring two, we got 6. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but if I want to go to someone like and again, they may not be interested, County Waste, and I know that they have their own facility, but let's just, because they're one of the bigger players.
Right.
Wouldn't you want to be able to, if they're able to bring in a larger tonnage, which is what we're after, don't we want to be able to give them a better price?
Well, if you're gonna do a sliding scale, I still think that you need to I think we need to incorporate some of what PJ's saying on one side, and then maybe a real top end number on the other.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the whole purpose of
For the
this.
real big guy.
Yeah, that's
you can do
the
that,
whole reason for a sliding
you
scale.
know, but
But we
it
need-
can't be so complex that
No,
she's gotta be there for.
no, we're trying not to, but I just want to make sure that at least that the group is open to that possibility. We'll need to work it out and present it to you so you can approve it. And that's not what we're asking for this month, to be able to go to committee. But I just want you to be at least, is it okay if we pursue that, or you just don't want it, or do you want us to just create a low
I
ball
think
number?
it's always good to
whatever the
create
case
an
may be.
incentive, Because somebody's gonna look at it from an incentive point of view, especially if they're using more than one resource, they're gonna think, well.
Right now, there may be going to be 3 going during
Right,
county,
but if I
you
do
know.
it all in one place, I get a
Right.
lower rate.
Correct. And again, it's close by, so potentially that allows them to do multiple runs, and so it's working out in the economy for them.
No different than a
So could we
distributor.
work
If they
on
say,
that for
give
the
us
next meeting?
$10,000 worth of business a year, we give you a different price. on that,
Exactly.
You know, I mean, the same thing.
I didn't do it that way. You get a sliding scale, but not crazy sliding scale kind of.
No, they're gonna be just a few. It's not gonna be every 1,000, every time. We're not gonna make a change of every time. No, no, no.
And then could,
Maybe we're gonna have 3 levels, who knows, something, but it's not gonna be overloaded.
and do we wanna do an overlay of an off-season or fire sale for the winter months?
Right, that's one that we would work on, so we would
Okay. So
have,
isn't there any reason we could look at both of them at the same time? And so
That would
we
be
do
the
have time to
intent.
get them in play?
that would be the intent.
So is this the first part of, that will market, try to increase tonnage, try to get more
Talk
volume,
about,
right? That's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the first part of this thing. As far as the RFP goes, that's for a later
Again,
date.
I still need to get,
No, I understand.
I need to have that guidance, but again, I need to have guidance.
I do think it would be helpful if we're gonna start marketing and you're gonna come up with a sliding scale, and it would be helpful to have I think if we do, I mean, in all fairness, Wendy hasn't been in there that long, right? And she apparently has ideas, okay? It would be nice to see, I think if we do this, and this, we could save this much money. And I think that would be, I think to give us better direction, if we had that in front of us, we could look at that. Because I think Wendy has a lot of ideas that, we haven't gotten all of them.
we have to implement these things to see what kind of real.
Right,
And I think
exactly.
part of that is.
And that's a
closing
big
down
part
some
of
I
of
think
these-
that'll give you the information we need as time goes. That's why I'm saying we can't rush into the RFP right away. But we give this. a
Do
chance
your
to
due
try to see
diligence.
this.
To Wendy's point, when you try some of these things, you're gonna try and increase tonnage, and, so we talked about what if we lowered the price and would get more tonnage? How does that balance out? Some of that is you gotta try it to come up with that math, And we're trying to do all that before we get into budget season you know, so that we can say, look, we tried something this year and we did something, but.
You also gotta be able
Just
to
like what
have-
happens when, every time we deal with the bag situation, every time we make an
Right.
adjustment in the bags, so that discussion comes up during
It takes
public works.
6 months to get there. and
We
then it
make an
takes 6
increase and
months.
people are concerned the fact that we've increased the bag cost, and therefore now you have the potential of folks dropping off and no longer utilizing the service, and one impact is going to have, but you have to implement it first to then unfortunately see what the
Right.
repercussions are and then look at that data. It's not that we're gonna have it all the time.
But the second part of this, of closing stations, that's a much larger.
Much larger.
Yeah.
I
That's a
absolutely-
much more difficult thing to try to
Could we frame
go
the,
through.
to go back to your request for kind of a menu, could we frame the revenue and cost impacts of those 4 stations that we talked about? What would happen if we were
We did it right here. And that's what this is about.
everything?
Everything's.
Not-
maybe
Well,
we
so
can-
here,
All of the,
I mean, it's hard for us to come up with, so these were coming off of, Jim, are these 2024 numbers? They're 2024 numbers,
Yeah.
right? So, as far as any miscellaneous expenses that incurred in 2024, those were not necessarily things that were separated particularly by station for us to keep track of. Moving forward for 2025, we're doing things a little bit differently in office to keep track of station. But in order to find everything that we've paid for stations for 2024, it would be a little bit of an undertaking for us right now. I mean, facilities does things for us. We've got bills and stuff that we've paid that didn't necessarily get marked somewhere that we can pull easily, that it came from the Gallatin station or the Livingston station or something like that. So there's a lot of those smaller miscellaneous fees.
So maybe you could come up with a percentage above these numbers that you would say is wrong.
I think that's small stuff.
We can go
Yeah,
through
it is.
We also need to be somewhat user-friendly to this point. When you come up with something that you say, geez, I really think we need to implement this, we gotta be able to get together a quick meeting and try to make it happen, you know.
Well, I mean, again, I have no issues if the group wants to meet on a monthly basis. Then that's absolutely fine. Then we just need to pick a date
And meet
that works for
before the-
everybody, so that way it works
before-
as far as the overall schedule.
Works.
I've got no issues with that whatsoever.
But isn't there something before public works? Or is that the first one?
Well,
There's two
county
meetings.
government is before public
Right.
works.
Well, I would tend to
If
think,
you know.
honestly, I would anticipate that we would need to meet at least a week ahead of time.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to do it the hour before.
Yeah,
public
because-
work.
This is
Right.
Wednesday,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Because then we can't get the materials.
Yeah, that works.
Okay,
So basically,
No, I would actually like to do it sooner than that. And the only reason I say that
Because
is
our agenda needs to be to Kelly by tomorrow.
Right, yeah.
because our agenda needs, our
So
agenda
do it the-
along with any resolution. needs
do
to be
it
agenda-
the first week of the month, like we do 0.1,
Oh, yeah.
you know, do it maybe that same
Yeah.
day or whatever, because
Yeah.
most,
Do it
you
that
know,
same day.
right.
Yeah, that's fine. Just so that way we have time to react and make modifications and.
Right, because then you
Yeah.
gotta, you gotta, yeah,
Because
a
otherwise-
whole week to
Nine,
get,
So we could probably do something by 10:30.
I don't know what
Right.
day we're talking about, but send out. I guess.
it's the Wednesday before full board. It's a week before full board. So one, you're looking at increasing marketing revenue, Wendy's ideas. 2, you're looking at possibly closing some stations down the line. And then 3, overall, the decision would be whether you want to sell solid waste altogether or partner. Right? So your first goal right now is,
Public-private partnership.
right,
Part of this, Wendy, is, the bag costs or fees. Is there any opportunity there? Is that something you would potentially present to us or no?
What, as far as increasing
Yeah.
the rate?
I mean, we've gone down that road before.
Was it really
We
gonna
just
make a
did, right?
difference or not?
didn't we just increase rates?
A couple of years ago.
Okay. Didn't seem that long ago.
it
No.
was Jeannie Metler, I thought.
Yeah,
Where she was.
Yeah, that's
So
true,
she hasn't
yeah.
been with us for 2 years.
Yeah, it was a couple of.
This is a second year, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So it's small, medium, large, 135. I mean, ideally, there's no reason why it can't be 246.
Right, exactly.
But, that's a conversation to have.
Well, I think that's something you can present to us and what the. revenue
Right.
difference
What
would be.
other ideas you have?
Or help us
So
another.
would that be
Yeah,
the 7th?
check something.
Yeah,
Oh,
every
let me
little
look.
chip.
Hold on one
Yeah,
second.
and that's the way we're gonna do this. We're gonna
You said the Wednesday group.
Yes,
Oh,
it is.
yeah.
It's the 7th.
Go down, sure.
So I just have a manager's meeting on Wednesday.
Well, that gets always delayed because of point one, so it'll probably be canceled that day. We either make it 11 o'clock or we cancel it.
Right.
So do we have a day?
So you're looking at the
May
7th.
Said May.
Yeah.
We don't have a housing conflict for that day, do we?
Let's see if I can check the other calendar. Hang on there.
What time, Phil?
Let's see, point one is 9, probably 11.
You're saying 11?
Yeah. Right.
I just sent something out, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I can make that or not, but that's fine.
Okay, so we got a little bit of a plan then.
We have, Wendy, I have a to-do list.
To-do list, yeah.
What's today, the 10th? Because there's 2 weeks that, yeah.
So that's what we're gonna have point one at 9:30. We should be done by early quarter 11.
Right, 10:30, yeah.
Can I also bring up one item? So, and this is small, okay, this is low hanging fruit. So the one of the last page that you have. Wendy was kind enough to put together this list, so I'll use the term again, past practice has been that every municipality, I want to make sure that I'm correct in saying every municipality.
It's all there.
Yeah, they're all there.
Even the villages.
Every municipality has had the opportunity of providing waste
Some
to,
free disposal.
Free disposal. It's basically free disposal. Noted here, some of it actually is used on town cleanup day, which is another rabbit hole to jump down. As far as town cleanup days are concerned, a lot of the towns that use town cleanup day use our containers. We are only paying we're only charging the town a 75-cent or $75, excuse me, drop off and pick up. So it's $75. We're not charging for the container. And then it's a reduced rate for the per tonnage. For 2024, that reduced rate was 101 a ton. I did get that moved up to 128. So municipalities are paying 128 a ton this year. So that's another thing that we're losing money on. It is, all cleanup days are usually on a Saturday. We are running overtime on Saturdays doing that. And so that also, although not on this free disposal report, because I just did not have time to put that information together, will increase the amount used per town. So it doesn't look like a lot, as Ray said, it's low hanging fruit. You know, we allot 5,300 in free disposal, 31 and change was used last year. With that being in mind, that does not include whichever towns did their free disposal day within the townships and the money that was saved utilizing our services.
Well, why are we losing money doing this? Why
Why
are
are
the
we
towns?
doing
Yeah, why are?
Yeah.
well, that's
we
my
shouldn't
point. That's
go-
why I'm bringing this up.
I think we should end it. I thought we
So my
talked about
point-
this at
So
budget
my
time.
point,
Yeah.
point is the reason Wendy
here.
Yeah.
is- put this is, I would like the committee to consider ending this track.
it should be, like, to be honest with you, I didn't even know we could do that. Like, in the town of Austerlitz, I would do a town cleanup
Well,
day,
you
and I
only
would.
have $100. So
What's that? No, we would pay for it, is what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
But
Oh,
so
yeah. We can
towns
all
can
do that. We do
decide
it.
whether they want to do cleanup days or not. Like the village of Chatham does one, the town of Chatham
We're
does
doing-
one, Hillsdale Propane does one.
We could do one.
Well, we just started.
I didn't even know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think that's
But
great.
anyways,
So again, to Ray's point about the
Well,
community,
you know what, if we gotta be charged.
some of the community doesn't use, not all the community uses solid waste, but solid waste, I'm telling you, we run this in our town. I mean, I've paid probably $10,000 a year between having our guys man it on Saturdays and tipping fees and all that stuff. I do it twice a year, but our residents love it. I mean, it's a service that we offer to them. And I wouldn't be doing that as cheap as I am if it wasn't for solid waste being there. I mean, we pay them, you know.
Well, it should be ended or it should cost what it.
Well, this is another free thing that just started
Yeah,
a
why?
long time ago.
This should be built.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, we're never gonna, how are we gonna make this, how can you have another thing, another free thing?
Agreed. That's why I keep saying that.
But I'm
this isn't
telling
gonna-
you,
this-
when we
So
stop
that's
it,
why-
somebody's gonna
but Ray,
complain.
That's why sometimes these committee meetings are difficult to get
You
focused.
gotta
because
dig
We don't
deep.
even know about them.
No, agreed. That's why we're
Why we're
bringing,
here.
that's why we're bringing these items up. I know it was low hanging fruit. That's why I waited
No,
to
I
the end,
think
but
that's-
I would say this practice should be, this practice in
Should be
particular
Well,
should be ended.
What if,
And,
what if-
and the other part of that, my apologies,
No,
Rob.
no, go ahead.
The other part of that is if a town is going to do a cleanup day, which is absolutely fine, that the town should be paying the cost of
The
the
cleanup.
I'm
containers
gonna do.
and labor.
I thought we were
Well,
gonna.
why
be
don't we
paying the right-
promote that,
the
is
full
what I'm
price.
saying.
To be
Yeah, I
honest
don't
with you,
even know about it. I've been a supervisor for 12 years.
I was gonna
didn't
say,
know
most
towns
of
do
these
that.
supervisors aren't even gonna know about
So
it.
what I'm saying is I would do a cleanup day, and if it brings in revenue for the county, we would pay for it.
And
If the
again,
town
that's
wants to.
back to promoting. So
What
we
would it,
include
what
that
would,
as
should
part
it
of our
be?
plan.
Like, was it one big dumpster you bring? Is that what it is?
So most of them are 50s. 50s are dropped off at townships and,
What would make it profitable to drop it off, pick it up, and it was full?
well, so here's the thing, okay? I don't want to pick on New Lebanon because I feel bad. I already did once today, but they have a town cleanup day and we are running back and forth there on Saturdays.
We go through 5 or 6 50-yard
Yeah,
dumpsters.
I mean, we
and
use the
twice
Chatham
a year.
station as a dropping, like that's kind of the dropping area, so they're not constantly doing Lebanon to Hudson like that. So we, kind of skirted over to Chatham. But we're running 5 or 6 times
Okay,
a day.
so what should that
So,
cost?
well, if I was charging
A normal
Yeah,
person.
we
per
wanna know.
person, it's every container is charged the price.
The regular price.
Which would be roughly what?
Well, I don't know the 50s off the top of my head. I think it's 700.
Yeah, I thought that's what it
That's what I
was.
would guess.
So it's like a
we-
$3,500 day.
So she's paying $200.
Yeah.
Oh, that's,
No,
that's-
$75.
Oh, that's
They're
crazy.
200.
No, I'm
That's
making
just the free
200.
money.
No, that's, she's
Oh, she
using
mixed it.
200.
And
I go back
that's why
into-
we're in a deficit.
I do.
Past practice, past
And
practice. I agree. That's why we're bringing it up.
We do charge the towns for the tires and that kind of thing separately.
Well, that should be.
So,
right?
but we are doing that,
Okay.
but there are
Gonna
some
make it
things.
more
I take direction from the supervisor.
So let me ask you a question. When you have these dumpsters there, you do a cleanup day, people can bring appliances?
Well, we usually get a separate one for metal. We have, what's his
You
name?
have to, you have
Bring
to have a
metal ones
separate.
down. And then is it Weissman? I think it is Weissman we're
have
using,
someone
you know.
for it, yeah.
But they bring us a couple metal cans and we'll load that separately. We have, our highway guys work all day long. We usually have some extra part-timers and stuff like that. So I'll have,
So-
5 or 6 guys there and they're getting paid overtime and stuff. It all goes into the figure. But I'm telling you, our residents just love it. That's my point is
Well, I'm
whatever
just
it
saying-
costs,
But nobody,
nobody
has to discontinue it. They just have to pay for it.
you gotta pay for it.
Right.
So why don't?
Yeah, I'm not asking you to
But as a
discontinue. I just,
supervisor,
that
I'm
issue,
suggesting.
I pay for
I just want to make
you
sure
know.
people are
So
paying for
let
it.
me ask another one more question here. First of all, I believe that we should be charging the towns, I'm a town, so, charge us, right? What it should be, period. Because if we're gonna run this like a business or start running this
Right.
more
Right,
like a
we're,
business,
what's that
we
term?
cannot be overlooking these things.
Enterprise?
Enterprise.
I've got another question. Where else, because I don't know all
We're
the loopholes
subsidizing.
here. Where else are we doing things for free that we maybe should be charging? Or do you want to get a list together and we
Let's
need to
have a
just negotiate that or discuss this next time? Because there's things that, like Rob said, I don't know.
We've talked about this and it's low hanging fruit. Jim can,
It's not
explain
that
a
low,
little.
that.
Well, no,
that's
it's
not-
No, right.
But the, we provide garbage service to every function, every government, every county building, think about that. If we were to completely get out of this, we would be paying for that.
That's
And
right.
again, Jim will tell you that,
Should that get billed to that?
well,
that-
but I think, I'll let Jim answer that, but go ahead, Jim, explain the whole thing with, attorneys and. accountants.
Do you, Ron, do you-
So we're- that's kind of a wash.
all right,
Okay.
The other question I have is like, for instance, each town has a dumpster service probably, which we do, but I know we use Barbados, so I don't know why, but I know you don't really do
Right.
just bar, right? So it's, because it'd be nice that if we all,
So
if we
I
could,
we offer 246 8-yard dumpster, but it literally is within a very small radius of where our station is. We
Right,
don't go
right.
out, it's not economically feasible.
Okay, but this, I'm very interested in this Garden Today thing, so I'd like you to give me some, like, it's what the cost could potentially be, I think it'd be great.
All right, can we like,
Yeah.
are we
Yes.
like,
Yes.
this is getting into
Yes.
The weeds.
each
Yeah.
town and
Yes.
we're already 2 hours into this meeting.
How about we
so-
have a motion to adjourn and we can get into
Second.
private conversation.
I'll make a motion.
All in favor?
Uh,
Thank you very much, folks. We'll continue on that. but-
Thank you, Tom.